the slides as well. So you can view it again at your leisure or get colleagues to watch it if it's useful. So we'll try. No, you won't bother with the IT. Claire will do that for me. Sorry, let me just. So I thought I'll start off just giving you an update on what's been happening in the pension fund over the last year. So the areas that I'm going to cover, how we've been performing with the investments and what we're doing on the stewardship front. It's been a really busy year, as you'll know, with the valuation. So an update on how that's gone and some of the key changes to the funding strategy statement. We've also got a change to our pensions committee structure. So I'll explain what's happening there. And then finally, Claire will give some important information about our year-end requirements with you. So we all know it's been a really difficult year with lots of market volatility. And this is reflected in the annual fund return for the year to 31st of December 22. So we're down just over 5% on the year. Thinking back on the key events, we've had the Ukraine invasion leading to the high oil and gas prices, fueling inflation, no pun intended there, that was already stretched with the supply issues caused by the COVID hangover. September gave us the mini budget that caused turmoil in the financial markets and provided a liquidity headache for many private pension schemes. But touching lots of wood, things are now starting to settle down. In the valuation, you'll have seen that we assumed a return of 4% per annum over those 3 years. So we're already behind the curve with that, and we'll need to make sure that we recover these losses with larger returns ahead of the 2025 valuation so that we can meet that expected investment performance. And the chart there shows the 1, 3, 5 years and the long term, and we're a healthy 8% per annum over the longer term. Moving on to how we actually invest the money that you pay in your contributions. You'll be aware we diversify our investments across a wide range of assets. And this slide just shows our current strategic asset allocation, which is being reviewed at the moment by the Pensions Committee. So I'll just briefly run over how we're managing the fund at the moment. So we've got just over half in equities. So these are company shares, and we have those slots split against 3 different funds. On the fixed income, which is the company and the government debt, we've got about 12.5% of the fund, 1 in investment grade credit and 1 in a passive fund, just trying to match the market return. 21% of the fund goes into alternative investments. So these are anything that's not your plain vanilla investments. So it will cover things like private markets, multi-asset credit, infrastructure. And if anyone's got a real interest in that, then I'm happy to explain further what that is. And then we have just over 10% in property. So this is mainly commercial property in the UK, but we've made recent investments into some residential funds looking at private sector renting and shared ownership. And then the balance there is just a small amount of cash that we have managed with Lincolnshire County Council's cash. I've been discussing stewardship and I've been discussing asset pooling since 2016. If any of you were about then, when the government set out the requirement that we had to pool our investment assets with other pension funds. So our partnership with Border to Coast, along with 10 other LGPS funds, went live in 2018. And we've now got over 50% of our assets, as you can see in the charts here, invested with them. We haven't actually added anything more to those 3 funds over the past year, but we are working on their global property offering, which we hope to be able to invest in the summer. We did make a decision over the last year that there will be one area that we won't look to pool with Border to Coast, and this is the alternatives mandate that we have with Morgan Stanley. It's a very specialist mandate. It's something that for the medium term we'll retain with Morgan Stanley, but as Border to Coast develop their capabilities, we will consider moving it across at some point in the future. And we're always at the mercy of what the government tell us we have to do with asset pooling. We've had presentations in the last few annual meetings on responsible investment, and there's been continuing interest in it from all stakeholders. And we're currently awaiting a response to a consultation from central government that was issued last year on climate reporting requirements. So there's a lot more work we still have to do on it. We do spend a lot of time ensuring that the pension fund and its managers are investing our assets, and obviously your assets, in good companies across the three areas of E, S and G, the environmental, the social and the governance areas. So just briefly going through some of the things that we've been doing in the past year. We reviewed the committee's responsible investment beliefs last year to make sure that they were still fit for purpose and meeting the requirements of the committee. We have a responsible investment policy that we approve every year. That was approved at the December meeting, and that's something that we work with Border to Coast as they manage most of our assets now to make sure that we are looking after our assets in the best possible way. We take a quarterly stewardship report to our committee, and if anyone is interested in seeing that, which details quite a lot of the work that our managers are doing on our behalf, then that's on the council's website where all the committee papers are. There is one area where we haven't been able to progress yet, and that's looking at a net zero target and setting a climate policy. But we're hoping to begin this later this year once we've reassessed our investment strategy and asset allocation. And I'm very pleased to say that we were successful in renewing our stewardship code submission. So we're one of only 20 LGPS funds that have been approved by the FRC for the 2021-22 financial year. But I think I asked this last time and was met with deathly silence, so may have the same again. But I would be interested in if you as our employers, if you've had any questions about how we're investing the fund, what we're doing, fossil fuels, Russia, all these things. We do get some direct emails, but it would be interesting to hear if you as our employers are getting any pressure on that front. So I will hold a second to see if there's a vast array of hands that get put up or not. So that's good. If none of you are getting any pressure, then hopefully you have all the information you need, and everyone is content with that. So that's just a very brief highlight of what's been happening in the pension fund over the past year. So moving on to the valuation. It's been a really busy year getting this finalised, and it was our first one with our new actuary, Barnett Waddingham. So changes in the methodology, how rates were calculated, how the assumptions were set, and also in the presentation of the papers that you received with your final rates on. So I'd really like to say a big thank you for getting the efforts, all the data into our administrator on time and the cleanliness of it. We shared our rates with you in November, and some of you attended the presentation that the actuary did that month, and also the individual surgeries that were offered. And I'm really pleased to say that all of our employers have returned their declarations, which, given we've got about 270 or so, that's a really big thing for us. So thank you very much for the effort you've made in getting those back to us in a timely way. And just to summarise the key changes in this valuation, you'll all have seen this, but across the whole, primary rates went up because with inflation, then the cost of providing the future pensions has increased quite considerably. Secondary rates went down. So for those of you that weren't fully funded, that was a positive, and that was mainly due to the better than expected investment returns that we were able to produce. And then, as we've already seen so far this year, it's been a challenging environment going forwards. We're not quite finished with the valuation and we've commissioned the actuary to do a review of the data quality, both at an overall fund level and also at an individual employer level. So once we receive these reports, we'll share them with the committee and with the board, and any employers where there are concerns about the quality of data held on the member records, we will be in touch. So this might be missing addresses, this might be leaver information not there, there's all sorts of different things, but we need to ensure that our data is as clean as possible. So if we do come to you and say that you need to improve your data, we ask that you work closely with our administration team to make any of the amendments that are needed. I say it's really important that the data we hold for your staff, for our scheme members, is as complete and as accurate as it can be. We need to make sure that our members are getting the right information so that they can do their planning for what their expected benefit entitlements are. And alongside the valuation work, we review the funding strategy statement, or FSS. We sent this out to all of you for consultation along with your valuation results, and we've had no comments back, so I'm assuming everyone is content with everything that's in there. I won't do a quiz to make sure you've all actually read it. But the FSS itself, what it does, it sets out the funding objectives and the strategy on how employers' liabilities will be met going forwards. And also how the fund treats different types of employers, both at admission, coming into the fund, and when they leave on a cessation event. And just as a reminder, all new admitted bodies, so this is where an employer outsources any service that's involving the transfer of staff to a new supplier, it now has to be made through a pass-through arrangement, even if it's just a small cleaning contract with one member of staff. What the pass-through route does is it simplifies the tendering process for you, and it reduces that risk to the contractors. They've got all the information they need to know about the cost of their pensions before they submit a response to you. So please do remember, it's vitally important that you get in touch with us really on in the process before you've gone out to tender, so we can give you everything that you need for those tender documents. And then the last key change in the FSS is the introduction of the self-service ill health and death in service insurance that I spoke about in some detail at this meeting last year. So this has now been built into the valuation model, and an element of your employer rate will cover the cost of that ill health insurance. So any of your employers that had been using Legal and General and their product, you should have been made aware that you don't need to renew that. This is all now self-contained within the fund. And I mentioned we've had a change to our pensions committee, or are having a change. So the current structure, we have 8 county councillors. We have 1 small scheduled body representative, and that's currently from a drainage board. We have 1 district council representative, that's currently from West Lindsey District Council, and we have a scheme member rep who's from the union, covering the interests of all our scheme members. But as we've got around 180 academies or multi-academy trusts in the fund, we felt that actually to improve the governance, we should have a representative from the academy sector too. So we took a paper to our pensions committee and to full council, and this was approved in December. So I have gone out to all the academies and multi-academy trusts asking for expressions of interest. And we'll be holding interviews at the end of this month. So hopefully we'll have a new committee member there for the March meeting. But please do remember, through your representatives, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to feed back, you can do that through the committee at any time. So I'm going to hand over to Claire now to just run through some specific requirements for the year end.
And we just have 1 slide today, looking at some of the arrangements that we would ask you to consider for this year end. The pension fund is moving to a new ledger supplier on the 1st of April this year, and this means that some of our normal processes will need to stop while we move from the old system to the new. To ensure that this runs smoothly, we would ask all employers if you could look at these 3 bullet points on the screen and comply with them wherever possible. We ask that you do not make any cash contributions, deficit payments, or payments of invoices on the 30th or 31st of March. We won't be able to receipt these in the normal way, and if we do receive payments on these dates, it might take us longer to match these to your employer records. submit contribution data and cash payments at the same time. Again, this will make it easier for us to allocate any income that we receive from you quickly and avoid delays with getting this matched onto your records. And finally, we would ask that you pay any outstanding 2022-23 deficits before the 31st of March. And this is particularly important this year, not only because of our change in ledger system, but because it's the end of the triennial valuation period. I've included the details of my colleague Josh Drotcliffe on the screen. I'm sure the majority of you are familiar with Josh. And if you've got any questions after today, please come to me or to Josh.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will pause there for a moment before we move on to the next area, just to see if anyone's got any questions or comments that they'd like to make. Just give you a moment to see if any chat or hands come up. No, nothing. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is hand over then to Jerry Taunton, who's going to give you a view from the Pension Board. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me. So this is just an introduction slide. The Pension Board was required under the Public Sector Pensions Act in 2013. The Lincolnshire Pension Board was established in June 2015, and the board comprises of 2 employee representatives, of which I'm one, and they are voting members, 2 scheme member representatives who are also voting, and an independent chair who's non-voting. Because my term expires in July, Joe can talk about the timing perhaps later, and I'm standing down as the governor of Boston College, then I can no longer sort of carry on as an employee representative. So Joe and the fund will be looking for a new employee representative on the board from July or slightly prior to that this year. So the purpose of the board is to work closely in partnership and assist the administrative authority, which is obviously Lincolnshire County Council, in its role as pension scheme manager. The major elements of this, I think probably the first one is the major thing, is the administration, the governance and administration of the scheme. Ensuring compliance with scheme regulations and any other legislation relating to the governance and administration of the pension scheme. I think that's the main focus of the board, really, is monitoring the governance administration through the West Yorkshire Pension Fund administration team. It's not part of the board's remit really to get involved in investment decisions, although we obviously understand that and look at what the committee are doing, but it's not part of the remit really to get involved in any investment decisions. Also securing compliance, ensuring that the fund and the scheme is securing compliance with the requirements imposed by the pensions regulator in relation to the scheme. As part of that, also ensuring that any breach of duty is considered and followed under the scheme's procedure for reporting to both the scheme manager and the pensions regulator. I think, again, just to stress the governance and administration aspect of the board, is to assist the scheme manager to ensure the effective and efficient governance and administration. That is a critical part of the board's remit, and I think is the major focus of the board meetings. And also any other matters, obviously, the scheme regulations may specify. Just moving on to the time and the commitment required for any board member. The board meets 4 times a year. Meetings are sort of 3 hours. There's ongoing training required, obviously, to ensure that the employee representative has a sufficient level of knowledge to undertake the role. Clearly, you're not going to have the same level of knowledge as somebody like Joe or Claire, but you do have to have a decent understanding, I think, to challenge at the board any issues that you want to look at and review. The training essentially can be within the board meeting itself, as part of the presentations at the board meetings, which constitute training. There are various online courses and also external courses. And also pension committees also have training sessions as part of their meetings, and the board members are obviously able to attend pension committee meetings, and then that will constitute training as part of the board training programme. So my experience, I'm sorry, slides are over. As I said earlier, the need for an employee representative, which there are 2 on the board, It's a statutory requirement under the Public Sector Pensions Act 2013. It is representing all the employers that are contributing to the Lincolnshire Pension Fund. So clearly it's important that the members are representative of the employers, that decisions are made by the administrative authority are understood and where appropriate challenged. So clearly it is important the employers make up the fund essentially and contribution to the fund. So the presence of an employer representative is very important to understand the way the fund is working, the policies, the procedures, and the challenge where appropriate. And again, just to stress again, I think the monitoring of the government's administration of the fund and the scheme and to challenge that when required. Again, that's an important aspect of it. There's always a presentation by the West Yorkshire Pension Fund who run the administration side of the scheme with Joe and Claire and the team here. That is a real focus of the board, I would say, not the investment side. I think it's important to remember that. So my experience over the 4 years I've been running in the board, I have found the board meetings extremely enjoyable and stimulating. They are a very rewarding experience, and I think obviously you've got a very strong pensions team here. I think it's fair to say that the pensions team, Joe and Claire and the team here, they are very capable. They give you support as you need. Really, if you've got any questions or any issues that you want to raise any outside of the meetings, then certainly Joe and Claire are always happy to help and answer those questions. And you get regular updates from them, regular reports on various issues and things like the Board of the Coast weekly report from them on the market. So there's a lot of information that comes out outside of the board meetings, and certainly Claire and Joe have always been very supportive, very helpful. And there's never any massive issues. There always are issues. There's always things that can improve, but generally it's a very well run fund. That makes the board's job easier, I would say. Also, Roger Buttery, who's the chair, is a very experienced chair. He's been, I'm not sure how long he's been chair for, but a number of years, certainly before my time. And he's got an extensive knowledge of pension schemes, both public and private sector, so it's good to have his knowledge and experience on the board. Again, as with Joe and Claire here, there's a good, capable administration team at West Yorkshire who control the administration processes. Again, there's also a presentation, a couple of presentations by the team there at the board meeting, running through their issues and the key data, the KPIs that they're looking to achieve and improve on. And again, that's always an interesting presentation and one that always stimulates a lot of debate. So overall, I would recommend if anyone's interested in going forward for a board membership as an employee representative, I think it is a very rewarding experience. It shows how the scheme is run. It's an insight into it. It gives you a fairly in-depth review of everything. And also, as I said earlier, attending committee meetings, which are always interesting as well. A lot of that is obviously about investments, which is interesting to listen to. But the whole experience I found very enjoyable, and certainly I'm very sorry to stand down. And certainly, I would certainly applying again if I was still staying on as a governor, but if I decided to stand down as a governor at college, then obviously that's not possible for me to keep staying as a member of the board. So I'll pass you over to Joe now just to look at the sort of requirements needed.
Thank you, Jerry. I think hopefully you'll agree that's been really useful, just trying to provide a bit of insight into what the board do, and particularly helpful to hear Jerry's view of his time on the board over the past 4 years. So this is now a bit of an early plea out there. We will need a replacement for Jerry. So it's anybody that comes from our employers. It could be a trustee, it could be a governor, it could be just somebody that works there that's just got that ability to represent the views of the employers. One of the key requirements that we're looking for, we want somebody that's interested in the LGPS. There's a lot of stuff that gets covered at these meetings. The local government pension scheme is really valuable to your staff. As a recruitment tool and just in terms of the benefits you're able to provide to them. So we want somebody that also has that ability to challenge and question. The role of the board is to do that, to ask questions of us as officers of the fund, to ask questions of our administrators, to be able to provide some assurance to the committee that we're all doing the jobs that we should be doing and ensuring that the administration and the governance of the fund is fit for purpose. We need somebody that's able and prepared to contribute at board meetings. So somebody that's happy to make their voice heard and question. And the other thing that is important is somebody that can commit that time. It's not too onerous. There are 4 meetings a year that last roughly 3 hours, but there is preparation. It's expected that any papers are read beforehand, attendance at the meetings, and this is generally in person, and then there's training that we offer throughout the year, some of this externally, some of it internally, and there is a statutory requirement for board members to have a certain level of training. I'm not trying to put you off there because we provide it all and assist you with that, but it is a time that you will need to put aside. If you're currently employed, then you do need to ensure that your employer recognises how much commitment will be required, and you obviously need the support of your employer to be able to do that. But hopefully, you know, as Jerry said, what we'll give you back in return, you get the full support from the internal team. You know, our colleagues in the West Yorkshire administration team are also always helpful and willing to explain and ensure that the understanding's there. And the other board members are all very supportive. It's a very friendly group, to be fair. It's that the meetings are always rather enjoyable. We will give initial training, and then there's ongoing training throughout the year that we offer. You do get paid a little bit too. It's not going to break the bank. The current added member allowance is just over £835 a year. And we also cover any travel and reasonable expenses as well. So please do get in touch with me if you're interested and would like to hear a bit more about it. Or I can pass on our chair of the board's details, because I'm sure he would be happy to have a chat with you about it. And then in April, I'll be sending out some formal communications asking for any nominations, as I say, and we would hope to be able to appoint somebody for the July committee meeting. But as I say, please do get in touch if this has sparked an interest in you. It's really important that we do have that employer representation on the pension board. You know, this is your chance to have that oversight and make sure that we're looking after that pension fund properly and looking after our scheme members properly. So again, I will stop for a second just to see if anyone's got any questions about the pension board that they'd like to ask Jerry or myself. Nothing coming through? Okay, so we shall move on then to our next external presenter. So Matt from West Yorkshire Pension Fund is going to be covering some of the governance side of our shared service. So over to you, Matt, and if you just give a nod or something, Claire will move the slides on for you.
Thank you, Joe. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Morning, everybody. Like before, any questions, wave your hand or shout out. And if there isn't anything as I go through the slides, then, you know, ask questions at the end. What I'm going to do today is just have a walk through an overview of perhaps the governance, the shared service, and perhaps what I found over the last 15 months being employed with West Yorkshire Pension Fund. So Claire, if you'd like to flick on to the next slide for me, and again for the first one. So some of the stuff's a bit of a review of last year. It's all still relevant. Just a reminder that we are one of the biggest and one of the best pension schemes, not just in the UK, but in the world. I think last year I reported that the collective fund value in England and Wales was £330 billion, even with these unprecedented times of mini budgets and high inflation. We've still managed to grow our pension funds in England and Wales by £12 billion. It's now £340 billion just to spend on LGPS members. The membership is still sitting around 6.2 to 6.5 million and 18,000 scheme employers. You can see on those numbers we're huge. And just a reminder that we have a long history. We've been around since 1890 in our poor law reforms. And regulations been in force since 1922. And I'm sure we're all aware of the current regulations that were put in place in 2014. However, we probably are likely to get some amended regulations through this year, or at least it's anticipated. If you don't know, we're probably, not guaranteed, but probably going to change the care scheme revaluation date from the 1st of April to the 6th of April. So there'll be a lot of news about that if indeed it happens. And I'm sure you're aware about McLeod, which concentrates on removing the age discrimination from pension benefits, so pension and retirement grants. But it's never focused on death grants. Now, death grants are capped at age 75. Anybody who's past their 75th birthday would not be entitled to a death grant. That's discrimination, and it is likely that that will be removed this year. And just to complicate things, as we always do in the LGPS, that legislation is likely to be backdated to 2011. So it's going to be a fun year ahead. But of course, what we do and what we do really well is we pay our scheme members their pensions, and should they predecease their partners and children, we pay the partners' pensions, and if the children are dependent and meet certain criteria, we pay them pensions as well. But as I said last year, and I sort of say quite a lot, this is a statutory scheme. It's Parliament that sets the rules. It is statutory, it is law. It's not what we want to do, it's what we must do under the statutory regulations. Next slide, please, Claire. I'm not really going to talk through the words on this slide, but just to say, isn't it good? Isn't it good that we're a defined benefit scheme? All those things that Joe outlined earlier about this year, you know, mini budgets and high inflation. We don't have a personal pot of money. On our scheme members, your employees don't have a personal pot of money. Their benefits are defined, and the longer they're in the scheme and the higher their pay, the bigger their pension should be. And there's even some better news, and I know we don't have great news when we talk about high inflation, but it does affect the contribution rates. And I know Amy, in her presentation, will tell you that there's some good news in what we may as individuals contribute to the pension scheme. But it's a really good message. We don't need a pension pot, our benefits are defined. Next slide, please, Claire. Specifically looking at Lincolnshire, the numbers are growing. It's now upwards of 76,000 scheme members and now 283 employers, which is up on last year as well. The mix is the same. Councils, the traditional council employers, academies are growing, and of course admitted bodies where we're allowing private companies contracted to local government, we allow their staff to join the scheme. The fund's around £3 billion, so that's brilliant news for all the pensioners. And I only discovered this figure recently, almost £85 million since April we've paid to Lincolnshire pensioners. And that's an eye-watering sum of money. I think we're in a really healthy situation. And we do this by applying the scheme rules. And Lincolnshire's role as the scheme manager of the admin authority is to make sure that the rules are applied appropriately and the benefits are paid correctly. Next slide, please, Claire. But of course, we are a shared service. Now, it's an administration shared service. So we be quite clear here, and I've been sort of trying to make this clear over the last 15 months or so. This is nothing to do with scheme investments that Joe talked about earlier. We are a collection of 4 like-minded funds with a common goal and a common interest to be the best scheme administration that we can within the LGPS. So we focus on the benefits that are payable, the service to employees, to our scheme members. Each individual fund has their own investment and they deal with that independently from each other. But when it comes to paying benefits and delivering the scheme regulations, we have a pool within our authorities so that we can share the knowledge, we can share the responsibility, and we can share the cost. And certainly I think I'm right in saying that the cost for the administration is currently the lowest in England and Wales. So that shows that we are not only performing well, but we're getting really good value for money. And just to make life easier, all scheme members have one central point of contact, which is West Yorkshire Pension Fund, because we provide the direct service to them about their benefit values. Next slide, please. Brilliant. So just all in all, the resources here to develop, to modernise, to support everybody, to support employers, to support Lincolnshire, and Lincolnshire to support ourselves. We are applying the regulations correctly, and we are looking after scheme data. And I think that's been reflected in what I found over the last year or so. And it's that bottom line: scheme members have the knowledge to make the irreversible decisions. Just from my experiences, that we are really looking after our data. We are having less errors, so that's well done to the employers. We are having less challenges from scheme members, whether that's informal or through IDRP or the pension ombudsman. And the number of those cases has significantly reduced over the last year, which just goes to show that I believe our members do know more about the scheme and are able to make decisions without worry and with knowledge. Next slide, please, Claire. So, improvements in the last 12 months. Well, we reviewed, one of the first things I did was review the data protection that we have here at West Yorkshire and how that affects the shared services, and the retention policies. And the retention policies were there, but they were a bit weak. And the reason why that's important is because, unlike employers like yourself, who must maintain pension data for 13 years, we retain pension data for what seems like forever. Certainly in our policies, it's 100 years or 15 years after death, or even more accurately, 15 years after the last pension payment is made. So you could consider a scenario where we pay to a dependent child and they die, would keep the record for 15 years after that date of death, just so that we are able to comply with any challenge on our legislation or our duties under legislation. But that child may have died well after the dependent partner, who may have died well after the scheme member. So arguably, we could be holding that data even then for 50 years or more after the scheme member's death. So it's important that we hold it correctly, and it's important that we're able to tell people and demonstrate that we comply with GDPR and scheme regulations. We have improved our key performance indicators and the reporting process. Apologies, that line in red, it shouldn't be. And we've done a lot of work to bring consistent reporting. It was accurate before, but we might just report on one element of a process or the time it takes to pay the benefits. But now we treat every process the same. It's the first contact from the member to the last letter that goes out having paid the benefits. So a clear, consistent process for up to 65 key performances. We've implemented a shared service risk register for the first time. Now, this is collaborative working. This is the 4 authorities getting around the table and saying, well, what are the risks? You know, we're looking back to the pandemic and looking forward to perhaps how legislation will affect what we do and how we do it. And by actually putting this down in a formal document, we're able to say that we recognise the risks that may be there, and our actions and our processes may be able to reduce that risk so that our scheme members are protected. Amy will talk about the training to Lincolnshire employers, but there's much of it, most of it, you know, a lot of it online or little podcasts or little online training events, which I hear have all gone really well. We've attended all pension board and pension committees in the last 12 months, mostly face-to-face, which I think has been received really well. I've certainly enjoyed working with the pension board and the committee, and we've delivered training on hot topics such as pension scams and McLeod. And I've mentioned 2 things that might come up this year, which might be the care revaluation and the removal of the age 75 death grant cap. And I don't really want to make the board or committee, because I know there's a couple of people who are called big-headed, and neither have I been prompted to promote them. But in my experience over more than 2 decades in the LGPS, I've worked with about 34 or 35 boards and committees, and I would say that Lincolnshire's is right up there as one of the very best. A skilled and knowledgeable board and committee, individually and collectively, genuinely engaged and committed to ensuring that all stakeholders actually deliver the legislation that's required. And I understand from this morning that there is a vacancy now on the board, and I would say if anyone is interested, contact Joe, because I think he would find it quite rewarding to work with such an organisation. So enough of the goodwill and all the rest of it. Next slide, please. Next 12 months. Well, we're going to try and reinforce that shared service brand. It's not a brand as one single identity, because there are 4 individuals, but we're trying to promote the administration, that collectivity, and we've tried to do that in the website. We've tried to do that with the risk register. We've even sort of got down to our automatic email responses, which lays out, you know, who does what, you know, and with a central point of contact. And we'll try and reinforce that over the next 12 months, working closely with all members of the partnership. The key performance indicators, although we've got the reporting really good, the best it's ever been, there's still some work to be done on perhaps how we can signpost where there's a pinch point, a resource plan, how we can deal with high levels or high volumes of work. So we've got a little bit of work to do for the shared service there. We're going to refine the information and training delivered to the pension board and committee. Joe's, we said there's going to be a restructure, but in those conversations that I've had with her about how we are involved and how we bring information and reports, there seems to be a commonality of what we want to share and how we want to share it, which is what we felt at the West Yorkshire, seems to be supported by Lincolnshire or vice versa. So we're going to be doing our best to revise that content and training, and then try and get that consistency of knowledge through our other partners. I'm sure as employers, you've heard about monthly postings. None of us probably like monthly postings too much. It's about that getting the data to us so that we can accurately provide information and benefits to our scheme members. But monthly postings is a way that we're going to improve that process. We're going to make sure that when your posting gets to West Yorkshire Pension Fund, the information you've put on there is as accurate as it's ever been. That should make our time at West Yorkshire easier, because we should be able to put the data onto the records much, much quicker. There'll be less errors and less queries. So that's better for us. But of course, if you're getting, as an employer, less queries and less errors, and you have less work to do to check your postings, then it must be better for you. It is going to be rolled out throughout this year. There will be some training provided, and I'm not sure whether that's coming from our finance team or through our employer team, but just watch this space, and please engage if you hear anything about monthly postings or MP3. On a similar theme about posting that information onto records, particularly creating new starter records, we have been asked, not just by the partnership, but also by our clients in fire, to establish some robust way to process potential breaches. And we're talking here disclosure regulations. I'm a little bit uncomfortable saying breaches, but it's information should be provided to a new employee within 2 months of starting. And very simply, it's like the nuts and bolts of the scheme, access maybe to a guide or that sort of information, access to a 50/50 or an opt-out form. Now, as employers, you can't provide the actual form, but you can let them know what website it's on. And here at West Yorkshire, we measure our performance with creating new starters and monthly postings by getting that data on the records within 10 days. But clearly, there's some work that we need to do to ensure that if it goes outside of 2 months, we can identify to the scheme manager, Lincolnshire, that the employer has provided this information and is out of time. Of course, as an employer, you might have written to them and there's no issue. But what we want to do is have a clear, robust process and a way of communicating this within ourselves, so that it doesn't become an issue and have to be escalated to, I don't know, the pension regulator, the TPR. And talking to the TPR, we seem to be doing quite a bit of work with them. First of all, with the dashboard. You probably, or I would expect you to have heard about the dashboard, where there's a big ticket item for the government, where pension benefits will be displayed online. It's like a one-stop shop for a scheme member to find out all their schemes, whether it's local government, other public sector, private sector, and they understand the values, and they understand who their administrators and scheme managers are, and then they can make contact to understand more information or receive payment. We've been working with them very closely for the best part of a year, and will continue as we implement the dashboard. It's actually been quite a rewarding process, because there has been a few times within the process that we've had ideas, suggestions, and implemented or started to implement certain things where the pension regulator hadn't thought of them, and they've been well received and may well be pushed out to the wider public sector. We're also working with them just at a high level around governance processes and protocols, everything from board training to conflicts of interests and registers. And if there's anything positive that comes out of this informal process, anything that can enhance the governance of Lincolnshire Pension Fund and their boards and committees, we'll pass that down, we'll share that information. And staying with the TPR, you may be aware that there currently is a Code of Practice 14, which is being removed and replaced with a single Code of Practice. I sort of call it a single code because they are actually, you know, amalgamating many codes that they have. The draft version is on the TPR website, and it does help us understand our roles within the LGPS. But I have already spoken to the TPR about potentially providing some training or some oversight information to boards and committees. But actually, I see no reason why that couldn't possibly be expanded and delivered to other stakeholders, such as employers. Claire, could you sort of roll on to the next slide? Not really going to talk about this slide because it just shows that there's loads of things as an administration, as a shared service, as a scheme manager we do. You know, it's not about benefits, it's about providing a really good service. Can we just move on to the last slide? I think it is. One more thing. I'm not going to go into detail here because I think Amy's going to cover lots of this, but it's just kind of a bit of a reminder. The cloud and dashboards now seem to be around for a very long time. And it almost feels in some ways that we're coming to the end of the journey, but it's the reverse that's true. We are just about to start implementing this, and as for next year, it is going to be real time and the information is going to be out there, particularly with the dashboards. It's quite key in the cloud to understand that our data, the data that you provide, is going to remove age discrimination. And as I said, we've got another element hot on its heels, the retirement grants. And dashboards, just to give you an idea of how huge this is, and this is Department for Work and Pensions figures, 43,000 pension schemes are involved in the dashboard, 52 million scheme members. And as it's designed for scheme members that have multiple benefits, the real scale could be more like 100 or 150 million different scheme benefits. So when we go live with this, when we implement this, we're really going to be in the shop window. So what I would like to do is just remind employers that that data that you keep for 13 years, pension data, please keep it for 13 years. If you're not sure where it is, if it sits with a payroll provider, find it, archive it, but make sure you know where it is. And even though we've had your data, we've asked you to reinforce that by filling in gaps or sending more. And when we've received it, we've validated, we believe it is correct. We know over the coming years, because we'll be doing this until legislation changes again for decade, 2, 3 decades, that there will be some challenges along the way. And the only way that we'll overcome those challenges is to make sure that the data we hold within the shared service, whether it's held at employer level or administration level, is as correct as it could be. So please double check you have that data and you have 13 years of it. And I think, Claire, that's the last slide. So any questions from anybody? Very quiet. Very well behaved employers you have, Joe.
Thank you, Matt. Well, hopefully everybody found that really useful. Just to remind you, our relationship with West Yorkshire and all they do with us and for us and on your behalf as well. So thank you, Matt. If anyone does have any questions after the event, please get in touch with me and I can always pass them on. So next then we shall move to another colleague from West Yorkshire, Amy, who's going to give us an update on the employer administration issues. So over to you, Amy. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm Amy, as Joe said, the Employer Relations Manager at West Yorkshire. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, great. Okay. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to give you an update on McLeod. Sorry, Claire, would you just flick to the next slide? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about McLeod, the pensions dashboard. I will cover some of the different employer support functions that we've got. And then I will touch on cost of living and touch about some member events that we've got coming up. And then I'll conclude today's session with a little bit on my pension, which is the obviously the self-service pension system that we have for all of your members. So next slide, please. Okay, so just to provide a little bit of a recap or background to the McLeod judgment. So basically this is in line with the changes that happened back in April 2014. So when the scheme changed from the final salary scheme to a career average revalued earnings pension scheme, members within 10 years of their normal pension age, which at that time was 65, on the 1st of April 2012, were provided with the underpin protection. So the underpin protection basically protected members' benefits where they had lost out as a result of the scheme changing. So if you flick to the next slide. So here you can see the criteria for the underpin. So any members who met this criteria, so they needed to have been active on the 31st of March 2012, active on the date that the scheme changed over, so that was the 31st of March 2014 and the 1st of April 2014, and had no disqualifying break of 5 or more years from any public sector pension scheme. And then the final piece of criteria there, they needed to have been 55 or over as at the 31st of March 2012. The McLeod remedy actually removes that piece of the criteria from members being able to benefit from the underpin. So it essentially removes the age criteria. So what that means is that the underpin protection now benefits many more members because that final piece of the criteria no longer applies. So if you move to the next slide, please. So hopefully you have picked up on the many communications that we've sent out about the McLeod judgment and the process of validating the data that we have for your employees over the past few years. We have carried out a sort of a consolidation exercise of the data that we hold on our records, just to make sure that we have all of the relevant data to allow us to carry out that comparison. So obviously that means we need full details of service history, service breaks, any unpaid service breaks that a member may have had, and of course obviously the care data as well, which of course we have. So over the past few years, like I say, we've sent out lots of communications, and we've encouraged you to send through any corrections that may need to be made to the members' records in order for us to carry out that comparison. So that data collection exercise is now closed. So if you do come across any records that do need updating or amending, you will need to use the record maintenance form to make those corrections. So there's nothing further really for you to do on the McLeod data collection exercise. We will simply carry out the comparison for every single member who meets that criteria at the relevant time, and we will pay them the highest benefits, so the benefits that they're entitled to, essentially. Okay, next slide. Okay, so moving on to the dashboard, which obviously Matt has already briefly touched on. So the Pensions Dashboard Programme is a national initiative, and essentially this is going to allow members to view all of their pension rights in one place online. So obviously this applies to personal pensions, other occupational pensions, other public service pensions, and of course it applies to us as well as the LGPS. So This will really help individuals obviously plan effectively for their retirement, so it will be a really useful tool. But as Matt's mentioned, all of the data is going to be even more visible than ever before. Obviously, it's already visible via My Pension, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later. But with the dashboard, there's going to be more and more national communication about it, more and more communication from us, communication from you to members, which will hopefully encourage members to engage with the dashboard programme, engage with the pension. But of course, what that's going to mean is that they will have sight of the data, they will be able to challenge any potential errors. So it is really, really important that you have a record of the data. So because any queries and questions that we can't validate with our records, we will expect that cooperation from you in order to make sure that these records are spot on, and that we can resolve any queries that members may have. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the dashboard program is a massive program, and it's going to be going on over the next few years. So pension schemes will be expected to be ready to sort of plug into the pensions dashboard on a phased approach depending on the size of the scheme. So the staging date for the LGPS is September 2024. Okay. All schemes will be connected to the dashboard by 2026, meaning that is the point that members will be able to see, the full picture of their pension entitlement via the dashboard. So if you click to the next slide. Okay, so at the moment, there is no immediate action that we need you to take with reference to the dashboard programme. However, as always, it's obviously a constant message that we will always portray, and that is around the importance of clean data. So importance of clean data is obviously fundamental to administering LGPS pension benefits effectively, and that's with reference to year-end valuation, but now of course with reference to the dashboard as well, because it is going to be so visible to members. So obviously make sure you have a consistent approach to clean data. Let us know of any changes to records, hours changes, address changes, new starters and leavers. So every month when you send us the monthly data file, we produce for you 4 exception reports. So these are a really useful way for you to consistently check that your data is correct and that what we hold on our records is correct. So every month we will summarise the hours changes that we've identified in that month from the monthly file. We will summarise the address changes that we've identified, the new starters we've identified, and then finally the final point there in red, which is really, really important, we will summarise what leavers we've identified in that month. So it's really good practice for you as an employer to review these exception reports each month. Make sure that you're happy with the information that we've updated and changed on our record. And that final one there that's in red, and it's in red for a reason, that's because we need you to actually take some action with that list. And that action, of course, is to send us leaver forms. Okay, so once we've identified a leaver, we can't update that record into a deferred status until we receive a leaver form from you. And that's because the leaver form is collecting pieces of information that are not available on the monthly file. So it's really important that you send us leaver forms as soon as reasonably possible when somebody has left. And if you use the exception report as almost like a checklist each month, you're never ever going to run into a situation where you've got a backlog of leavers. If you're wanting to do a bit of a clean-up exercise of your leavers, we can work with you to do that. So you can contact your PFR, and I'll come on to the role of the PFR in a couple of slides, but you can contact your PFR, who will be able to give you a full sort of cumulative list of any outstanding leavers that you may have on your record, and then you can obviously work through that list, send us the leaver forms, which will of course bring you up to date with your leavers. Just to touch on something that Matt mentioned about MP3. So we have made some developments to the monthly data collection process, which is in the sort of the final stages of being tested. So we will be contacting employers on a very, very soft kind of rollout approach for you to receive a demonstration of this new system. So do look out for those emails from us. That will allow us the opportunity to show you the new system, give you some pointers on how that will work. Obviously, it will be a fully supported implementation process, but we are in the early stages, like I say, of rolling out some demos on that. So if you do hear from us to receive a demo, please do engage with those emails so that we can get those booked in. Okay, next slide. Okay, so again, this is on the theme of data quality. So recently we have published a checklist for your month 12 file. So obviously we are coming up to year end. So that month 12 file that you send us is absolutely fundamental to the production of the annual benefit statements. So obviously the annual pension statements, annual benefit statements are a statutory requirement for members. So every year we have to produce a statement for members to give them a full account of their entitlement in the pension scheme, and that includes some really useful estimates on there. So it's a really useful document for members to start planning their retirement and just have sight of really the value of the pension. Now, we use the data that you send to us each year, but more importantly, there's a few extra bits of information on that month 12 file that we need in order to produce the annual pension statements. If we can't, for any reason, produce the statement, that's when you will receive a block or a quarantine process, which is obviously additional work for you to do. So it's really important that you really take extra care when you're sending us the month 12 file to make sure you've put in, you know, the FT final pay on there, to make sure that you have told us about APP throughout the full year, because any of these errors, they will stop the statement being produced, and then that will only result in a block or a quarantine process, which of course is more work for you to pick up. So we've put together the checklist to help with putting that file together. So hopefully you've seen that came out on the blog, on the Pension Matters blog. So if you're not signed up to receive the updates from Pension Matters, you'll get the checklist in the roundup, which will come at the end of the month via email. But if you aren't signed up to Pension Matters, I would definitely encourage you to sign up to that, so that you do get these updates as and when they are being published from us. Something else that you may want to consider doing in the lead up and in the preparation for year end is a membership audit. That is where you'll work with your PFR to have a review of all of your employees' records to make sure that they're in the correct status. So that's a really useful exercise to do in the preparation for year end. So if that is something that you think that your data may benefit from, you contact your PFR. So if you just click to the next slide, please. Yeah, perfect. So these are the PFRs for Lincolnshire Pension Fund. So we've got Kaylee Pilcher, who has worked with the pension fund for years. She does a fantastic job of supporting employees. I'm sure you've all worked with Kaylee before. doing membership audits, working with Kaylee to receive training, and I'm sure you've heard from her when your levers aren't up to date. She manages that process really well. So I'm sure you've all very familiar with Kaylee, who looks after the bulk of the employers in Lincolnshire Pension Fund. Ahmed, who you can also see on the slide there, has just taken on a small portion of employers within the pension fund as well. So you may notice that your PFR has changed from Kaylee to Ahmed. Now, the support that you can expect from either of the team there is basically, you know, any one-to-one training that you need, which we generally do over Teams at the moment. Obviously, the PFRs will work with you to do membership audits, and basically they're just a point of contact for you if you have any questions about your responsibility as an employer. So please don't, you know, be in the dark or wonder what you need to be doing. Please do reach out to your PFR if you've got any questions at all about your responsibilities as an employer. We do a lot of training. So training tends to be on a Tuesday or a Thursday, and they tend to be half an hour sessions. So hopefully quite easy to fit into your working day. So the training that we are working through at the moment is all around preparing for year end. So I've included a link on the slide there, which will take you to the events that we've got scheduled at the moment. So if you haven't been to our training, we always get really good feedback. It's always really well received. So I do think it probably is worthwhile, good use of your time to book on a session if you haven't been to our training already. We do have recordings of all the training that we do, which is on our website, and all the slides are on there. But obviously, I think you probably get a better experience if you join us for a live session, and you can ask us questions and interact. So that's our training. On to the next slide. Okay, so moving on now to some member stuff. Okay, so cost of living. So as we are all aware, obviously, you can't miss that at the moment. Cost of living is increasing, inflation is rising, which may mean that members are looking at their finances and may view their pension contributions as an expense that they just can't afford at the moment. Now, there's sort of 2 points that I want to make on this. The first one is there is a short-term solution, a short-term option for members, which is obviously the 50/50 section, which I'll come on to. But also, potentially some members may see a reduction in their contribution rate. So if you just click to the next slide. So here we have the 2023-2024 contribution rates. So whilst the rates are the same, the bandings that apply to each rate have been moved in line with CPI. So they've been moved by 10.1%. Now, if the member's pay has not also been moved by 10%, which obviously is very unlikely in public sector, some members will actually see a reduction in their contribution rate that they will pay from April compared to last year. So, for example, somebody earning 39,000 last year would have paid 6.8%. Next year, they're going to pay 6.5%. And obviously, because the scheme is a defined benefit scheme, that there's going to be no impact to their benefits just because they're paying less into the scheme. Somebody earning 24,000 last year would have paid 6.5%. Now they'll pay 5.8%. So that's quite a big difference in their pension contributions. So that is worth bearing in mind for anyone who may be thinking about opting out. It potentially may cost them less from April. So I think that's a really good message to take. But for some people, the contribution rate may not change, or the contribution rate change may not be enough of a cost saving exercise for them. So if you just flick to the next slide. Thank you. There's obviously the 50-50 option. Okay, so this is very much seen as a short-term solution or an alternative to opting out of the scheme. So the 50-50 section, of course, allows members to pay half of the normal pension contributions. But in the 50-50 section, they will still build up a guaranteed pension. Obviously, it's going to be at half of the rate of the normal main section of the scheme. So it's going to be at a pension based on a 1/98th of their pay as opposed to a 49th. So they will accrue half of the pension. However, they obviously still have access to the full life cover, the full ill health cover. Employer still pays in the full amount on the member's behalf. And of course, they've got the option to return into the main scheme at any time. They will automatically be brought back into the main scheme when it reaches the auto enrolment anniversary anyway. But it is a really good alternative to members who are thinking about opting out because of maybe struggling with the pension contributions. So we would encourage you to communicate that to anyone who is thinking about opting out of the scheme. So if we just flick to the next slide. So we've got an example here of just how the members' take-home pay would be affected if they were to go into the 50-50 section of the scheme. So I think the net saving is £42.54. So it's not half of the saving, obviously, because of the tax relief in this particular example, but it is a saving for the member, and they are still building up a pension for themselves, albeit at a slower rate. But then more importantly, their family is fully protected, and their ill health cover is still the full cover. So a really good alternative. Next slide. Okay, so still on the topic of members, we are just about to launch some member engagement sessions. So last year we ran some online sessions for Pensions Awareness Week for members. So we did a full week of different presentations each day, invited members to join us for an online webinar just to talk to them about the benefits of the scheme. So on a very similar theme, we've come up with our own kind of programme, which we're calling Engage with Your LGPS Pension. So the idea here is to give members the opportunity to learn about the pension, to understand what the benefits are, to understand what they're paying for, to understand what they need to do as a member, really just covering the absolute basics of the scheme. We did find doing the Pensions Awareness Week sessions that there was quite a lack of understanding really on just the basic benefits that members are paying for. So there will be 3 unique sessions in this programme, which will be repeated each month from April through to September. So what we would like to see is members attending session 1 or 2, which you can see on the slide there, which will cover the fundamentals, the basics of the scheme, depending on when they joined. And then we'd like to see them follow that up by attending the annual pension statement session. We found with the Pensions Awareness Week presentations that we did, any members that joined us for an Understanding Your Annual Pension Statement session who hadn't been to a previous webinar to understand the basics of the scheme, we found that it was difficult for them to really take the messages from that session. So that's what we're hoping for from those sessions. Promotional materials will be coming very soon, so we ask that you promote that through your internal channels at any opportunity that you can. If you just flick to the next slide. Okay, so there's the timetable. So like I say, we'll kick these off in April and we'll do them each month through to September. And And we've tried to put them at all different sort of times during the day to give people plenty of opportunity to attend, depending on their working pattern. In September, we will obviously review how they've gone. You know, we may continue to do these indefinitely. We may add different types of sessions. So we'll see how they go and develop that sort of idea based on the feedback that we get from those sessions. Okay, on to the next slide. Perfect. So just to conclude my update today with a little bit on my pension. So obviously my pension is the self-service portal for members. So it's actually our primary way really of communicating with members. So at the moment, within the Lincolnshire Pension Fund, there is just over 30,000 members signed up to access my pension, which is great. If we're thinking about the active members, it's actually just under 60% of active members, which is it's a really, really good position to be in, especially considering we've not been, you know, just online for too long. So obviously that's a testament to I think to you guys promoting the service. So it's important that you obviously continue to promote the online services as much as you can, because obviously those members who aren't signed up aren't getting, you know, aren't looking at their annual pension statement, aren't having sight of their pension record, and obviously that's really important. So if we just click to the next slide, you can see how that's the sign-ups have grown over time, and we will just obviously continue to promote the online service, obviously with your help, and hopefully we'll get close to that 100% sign-up rate. If anyone doesn't want to sign up to the online service, that's fine, but in order for them to receive their annual pension statement through the post, they will have to opt out of electronic communications. So that's quite a key message as well. So for any members who really just don't want to do the online thing, that's fine, but they need to take some action and opt out. Next slide. So just to recap the functions of my pension. So this system allows members to view their membership details, so they can see their service on there. They can view important documents. So this is a really key one. So the annual pension statements that we produce are published via my pension, and that's how the members will receive them. So they'll get an email to say that their statement is on their online account. They can view and update contact details on there, so that's a really useful function. They can view and update their death grant nomination, so again that's also really, really useful for members. A, to see who they've got nominated, and B, to have the ability to review and update that nomination. And then finally, this is a relatively new development, something that we have obviously been waiting for quite some time. Members can actually produce their own retirement estimates via the My Pension system. So over the next few slides, I'm just going to run through just how easy it is for members to do that. So if you just see the next slide, so they'll just log in to My Pension as normal and go into the membership details data view. And then on the left hand side, there's a series of options. So they want to be picking the retirement calculator. So that will bring up the box that you can see on the slide there. So they can input any date of retirement that they are thinking about, obviously between 55 and 75. So they'll put that date into the box and then click submit. And then if we just see the next slide, then it will ask the member to confirm their pay details. So it will automatically populate those fields. Those fields will be based on the pay that we have as at the end of the last financial year. So it may be that those pay figures are slightly outdated, depending on where we are within the year, but members can update those pay details to anything to a more current value. So obviously we've got final pensionable salary, which is the FTE, and then the projected pensionable salary, which is with reference to care benefits. So if the member's part-time, we will be looking there to see the annual part-time salary. So member would verify the pay details, click submit, and then if we just go to the next slide, the system then will actually produce a document for the member, which has everything that they would normally see on a pension estimate that we produce for them anyway. So they'll see their standard benefits, so their automatic lump sum if they've got one, and their standard pension. And then it's also going to show them their maximum lump sum and the effect on their pension should they decide to take that maximum lump sum. So all of that information is produced on a document for them. The document is stored on the record, so they can come back to it and view it at a later date. And they can quite literally produce as many estimates as they want. So if they are in their early stages of thinking about retiring, and they're wanting to consider, you know, age 60, 61, 62, they have the complete flexibility to just produce as many estimates as they wish, really. So it's a really, really good tool for members, especially when they are in those early stages of retirement planning. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we have got some guidance notes on that process that I've just been through for members. So we have got how to run your estimate step by step for members. We have got guidance to guide them through the sign up process in the form of a video. So that's something that if you do have the opportunity to push that out to your employees, that would be a really good one to you know, put on your link on your intranet sites or send out in any mail shots that you can. We have some frequently asked questions on my pension there. So yeah, any opportunity that you've got to promote my pension, we do appreciate you getting those messages out. And obviously it's working because we've got obviously the majority of active members signed up, so that's really positive. And then next slide, I think that brings me to the end of my update today. So just to conclude, obviously the role of the employee relations team is to work with you, to support you in any of your LGPS operational responsibilities. So anything connected to the data, the day-to-day running of the pension scheme, our team is there to support you with those responsibilities. So obviously you've got your employer pension fund rep as your first point of contact. That's either Kaylee or Ahmed. We have a team mailbox and a team helpline, which is on the slide there. So if your PFR is not in that day, there'll be somebody else who can help you. We have got obviously lots and lots of data information on our website to help you with all of the processes that you may come up against. So please do reach out if you do need any support with your operational duties as an LGPS employer. Please direct your members to our member helpline or our member email address, which is on the slide there. So hopefully that's been a useful update for you. If you have any questions at all, then please shout up.
Thank you, Amy. That was very comprehensive, a lot of information there for employers to take away and hopefully share with their scheme members as well. So I can't see any hands or anything in the chat, but again, if anyone comes up with any questions, you've obviously got the contact details there to get in touch. So the last part of the session then is the presentation from AVC-wise. Oh, sorry. Yep. We've had a comment saying how good that was, so thank you. I thought we'd got a question there. I thought we'd bucked the trend and had a question. But no, I will hand over to Stephen Black, who will run through what AVC-wise can do for you as an employer. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I just wonder if everyone's saving their questions for me at the end. I don't know. But I'll try and get you through this, aiming for a 12 o'clock finish. You'll see there, AVC-wise, I'm going to talk to you about something called salary sacrifice, shared cost, additional voluntary contributions, which is dreadful terminology, I know, but it's actually much more exciting than what it sounds. So if we click on, and I'll just explain a little bit about AVC-wise, our parent company is PS Tax. Some of you will know PS Tax. They're experts in salary sacrifice and tax and VAT and that type of thing. So you'll know that when an employer looks at salary sacrifice arrangements, they need to get the right advice to keep them on the right side of HMRC. But there was something that's unique to local government that got clarified a few years ago that meant that PS Tax set up a smaller company, which is AVC-wise, to look at this particular thing to do with the local government pension scheme. I'm joined today by my colleague Tim McEwen. Tim will pick up any questions that you've got at the end, but for both Tim and I, our history is actually with Prudential. You'll know Prudential are your EVC provider. Tim and I worked with Pru for many years until getting made redundant 5 years ago. So local gov and EVCs has been kind of our life for about the past 20 years or so, on and off. So if I just share with you on the next slide, and I'll say at this stage, you don't actually, everything I'm going to talk to you about today, you don't actually need AVC-wise for. You could look at this independent of us and do this yourselves. Having said that, you'll see on screen there a number of our partners. The obvious one sits in the middle, North Kesteven. Out of all the employers in Lincolnshire pension fund, only one employer, North Kesteven, currently offers this thing called a salary sacrifice shared cost AVC. By comparison, you've heard from West Yorkshire, there's 13 employers in West Yorkshire are our clients already. Every council apart from Calderdale currently offer their members salary sacrifice shared cost EVCs. So don't worry about whatever size of employer you are, whether you're big or small. We run salary sacrifice schemes for the largest councils in the UK, right down to Academy Trusts. For example, in West Yorkshire, there's the Bishop Wheeler Catholic Academy Trust. So big or small makes no difference. So if we crack on, one of the things that that I'll and something that I'm guessing you'll be aware of, and there'll be greater focus coming out of COVID on, is the financial well-being of staff. I've noticed quite a shift with employers coming out of COVID, where whilst it's important for employers to save money, a much greater emphasis and focus on the well-being and financial well-being of staff. Amy touched on cost of living there in the last session, which is something that that I'll touch on a little bit later. But if we look at the legislation in the next slide, I think it was Matt who maybe mentioned earlier, Parliament. It's Parliament that sets the rules. And that's what I'm going to talk about here. There was a clarification through the LGA, so the Local Government Association, a number of years ago, that said the AVC part of the local government pension scheme can be set up in a shared cost basis via salary sacrifice. What does that mean? Well, what it means is, at the moment with a standard AVC, to prove your members save tax, that's it. Whereas your AVC with Pru, if it's set up in a shared cost basis via salary sacrifice, not only does the member save tax, but they also save national insurance. But you as the employer, you also save national insurance. Now, you don't need me to tell you, with austerity measures, over the years, you're getting squeezed more and more and more to make savings and efficiencies. So the popularity of shared cost AVCs through salary sacrifice has just exploded in the last few years. And a couple of years ago, the LGA released a bulletin. I'm not sure how many of you keep up to speed with the LGA pension bulletins, but you can have a look at this after today, where they've just explained how shared cost EVCs through salary sacrifice work. Unusually, what they did was name checked EVC wise within their bulletin. That's really unusual, but there's a reason for that. We're the only company that do what we do. So if we move on a little bit more, and I explained, so I'm just going to go back in time a little bit here for you as well. Some of you have been around local gov long enough to remember back to 2006 was the government pension reforms. A-Day, 6th of April 2006. I still describe that as the most exciting day in my career, which makes me sound incredibly sad, I know. But anyway, what the government were doing back then, they were trying to encourage people to save more, because generally speaking, we don't save enough, yet on average we're living longer, and at the same time they were trying to simplify all the different pension rules across the UK and different schemes. But the encouragement to save more is that we're allowed to take more out. Our pension schemes now as a tax-free lump sum. So whichever pension scheme you belong to in the UK, you're now allowed to take up to 25% of the benefits out as a tax-free lump sum, which is much greater than what was allowed previously. So of course, you're all in the local government pension scheme. You can take, some of you will have an automatic tax-free lump sum through the 80th scheme, but if you want a bigger tax-free lump sum, you could do that by reducing your index-linked pension at retirement, or what you can do is pay AVCs and use your AVC as the vehicle to give yourself the bigger tax-free lump sum so that you're getting more tax-free but without compromising your valuable index-linked pension when you do it. So that's the first thing that's unique about local gov, this ability up to your limit to take the whole AVC back as a tax-free lump sum. You can't do that in any of the other public sector schemes. And I'm sure you all know people, especially the ones close to retirement, who were piling in maybe thousands of pounds per month in the run up to retirement into their AVC because they can get tax relief on their contributions with the aim of taking it out as a tax-free lump sum. So saving tax is fantastic. Your basic rate taxpayers save tax at 20%, higher rate at 40%. But if we take it one stage further, if you allow them to pay the AVCs under this salary sacrifice basis, not only did they save tax, but they also get to save national insurance as well. So your basic rate taxpayers could save tax at 20% and national insurance at 12%. Your higher rate taxpayers can save tax at 40% and national insurance at 2%. So that's a real, especially in these current times of cost of living, people that are trying to save that bit extra for retirement, being able to save national insurance on top of the tax is a huge benefit for them. What's in it for you as the employer is if your members are saving national insurance, so do you. And your national insurance savings typically would be 14.3%. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. But if I give you an example of how this actually works in practice, so if we move on to the next slide, and we'll just look at a typical pay slip. So imagine you're Joe at the moment, you're local gov, you earn 30,000 a year, and this first column assumes you don't pay additional voluntary contributions to Prue. So you earn 2,500 a month, you pay your standard 162.50 to your local gov scheme, pay standard tax, standard NI, you've got a net pay of 1,905. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll have a look at the second column. With the exception of North Kesteven, everyone else, you offer your employees the standard AVC where they get to save tax. So if Joe here puts in £250 a month, he's a basic rate taxpayer. So he pays tax at 20%, which means he'll save tax at 20% on his AVC contribution to Prue. So you'll notice 250 goes to his AVC, and you'll notice his tax comes down by £50. So there's his 20% tax saving. His NI doesn't change, and he's left with a net pay of 1,705. So 250 goes to Prue, his tax drops by £50, he's left £200 worse off in his take-home pay. So if we look at the final column, you could also, as well as the standard AVC, you could allow your staff to pay AVCs on this shared cost basis via salary sacrifice. So if we get to grips with the terminology, first of all, a shared cost AVC is one where both you as the employee and your employer, you both contribute, i.e. you share in that cost. Your share in that cost is always regarded as £1 per month, with the balance treated as the employer's contribution. So Joe here, if he wanted to pay his 250 to Prue, £1 is treated as his money, 249 is treated as the employer's money. Now, of course, don't get too excited by that just yet, because the employer isn't just going to put money into the members' AVC out the goodness of their heart. What they get you to do as the employee is you sacrifice the equivalent amount from your monthly pay. So if we work top to bottom here in this third column, you'll notice Joe's pay in the top line. He sacrificed £249 of pay. His pay's come down to 2251. So he's given up 249. The employer takes that along with Joe's £1 and sends the 250 to Prue. Now, the most common question I get asked at this stage is, Stephen, is that not a bad idea? If I give up salary at the top end, will that not have an impact on my main local government pension scheme benefits? The answer to that is no. If you think about it, it would make no sense whatsoever. If you were trying to save more for retirement on one hand into your EVC, if it was going to damage your main scheme benefits on the other hand, you wouldn't do it. Why would you? Madness. So you'll notice in the second line, Joe continues to pay £162.50 to his local government scheme. He pays exactly the same to get exactly the same main scheme benefits when he retires, because your main scheme benefits aren't calculated on the reduced salary. They're calculated on the original salary, which is called notional salary. In Joe's case, the £2,500 a month. So hopefully that's making sense so far. So his 250 goes to Prue. He saves exactly the same £50 in tax. And hopefully some of you are ahead of me at this stage and you'll have noticed, wait a minute, his national insurance has changed. It was 174, now it's 144. Why is that? Well, for the purposes of calculating national insurance, it is the reduced salary of 2251 that can be used. So what you'll notice in the third column is that same £250 that gets sent to Prue, he saves £50 in tax and almost £30 in national insurance, and he's now left with a higher net pay as a result. In the middle column, the 250 to Prue, his net pay was 1,705. The last column, it's now 1,735 because of what he saved in national insurance. So if we move to the next slide, and I'll stop for questions after this next slide. And if you just click through there, Claire, and you'll see that standard AVC that you offer your members, that 250 costs the member 200. With this shared cost AVC, that same 250 only costs the member £170.12, thanks to the NI savings. And just one more click there, Claire. That's great, thank you. So because of the NI savings that are available to the member. So if you put yourself in the position of Joe to write, what would I rather do? Would I rather save 250 to Prue and it cost me £200 to do it? Or would I rather save 250 to Prue and it only cost me £170.12 to do it? Hopefully you're all sitting thinking there, well, actually, I would rather it only cost £170.12 because of the NI savings. Okay, so I'm going to pause for breath. That's as exciting as it gets for me in this session today, is what you see there. I've got some other stuff that I'll cover, but if there's any questions, then I don't know if there's anything been posted or if anyone wants to ask questions. So there's one.
Stephen, I was just about to say, to go with the theme of today, we haven't had any questions, but Sally has just bucked that trend. So her question is, do you have to earn a minimum amount? So I assume I mean, there's limits that you can pay into AVCs, Sally. You can't pay so much in that you would drop below the lower earnings limit. But I guess the more pertinent question there, Stephen, is the amount that you pay tax on. Because if you're not a taxpayer, of course, then that defeats the big advantage that you've just pointed out. So I would say, Sally, for AVCs to be relevant for anybody, you'd have to be a taxpayer.
Yeah, and that other point, Tim, that you mentioned, when it comes to salary sacrifice, you're not allowed to let staff drop below national living wage. So so there will be limits. Yeah, there will be limits in there.
Okay, Sally has said thank you, so we must have answered that.
Okay, great. Anything else before we move on?
Our only question so far.
No. Okay, so let's crack on. If we go on to the next slide, I've mentioned Prue quite a number of times there. It's prudential for Lincolnshire there, your EVC, provided there's no change to that. Everything I'm talking about at the moment doesn't affect your EVC provider, so that money continues to go to Prue as it always has. So no change there. One of the things I would say about Prue as we go through today, you might be thinking, right, actually, if we can save money as an employer and it helps the financial well-being of our AVC payers, why wouldn't you offer them shared cost AVCs? But Prue only allow a limited number of employers to launch with shared cost AVCs each month. So again, back to austerity measures and councils and employers being squeezed for money. As you can imagine, the popularity of shared cost AVCs just grows and grows and grows. Prue will not accept any new employers launching shared cost AVCs now until July at the earliest. We're in February and Prue's runway is full until July. So that's good in some ways, that you realise, right, actually, there's quite an attraction here to do this. The flip side of that is that runway is just getting stacked up and it's just getting worse at the moment. But unfortunately, we can't do anything to change that, I'm afraid. If we go on to the next slide, and I'll talk about, so this is the AVC-wise part of this. Now, it's only fair that I mention at this stage, you don't need AVC-wise to administer this benefit for you, although we're the only company that provide this particular service. There is nothing to stop you setting up your shared cost AVC in-house and running it yourself. The nearest employer to you who does that, and they do it incredibly well, is University of Lincoln, although they're in East Riding Pension Fund, but they run it in-house. So if you've got the knowledge and resource to do this yourself, then you would do it yourself, because what comes with AVC-wise is, obviously, AVC-wise not being a charity, we charge employers for administering the scheme for them. So actually, you don't need us. You could do it yourself and keep all of your savings, as opposed to giving us a slice of the savings that you make. To run it yourself, however, what you'll see on screen there, that is what you would need to do with yourself in-house. I think I mentioned there's 13 employers in West Yorkshire Pension Fund. I don't think any of them run it in-house. Maybe Amy or Matt, if you're still on, challenge me if I'm wrong. I think all of the 13 who do it through AVC-wise. I don't think anyone runs it in-house. Kirklees Council used to, but then they moved across to AVC-wise for all the support that we give. I see Sally's asked a question for us on our fee. I'm as well covering that just now, Sally. It's on a slide later. But you know how we spoke about your savings as the employer, so you save 13.8 national insurance plus a 0.5% apprenticeship levy if your wage bill is more than 3 million a year. So let's assume it's 14.3 that you save. Of that 14.3 NI savings that you save, you give 4.5 to AVC-wise, you're left with a net NI saving of 9.8. However, and it is a big however, our fee is going up from the 1st of April to 5%. So let's assume we've not got a signed contract from you by the 1st of April, really unlikely given that it's a month away. Then you would say then I at 14.3, give us 5, you're left with a net saving of 9.3. The key thing there is you're saving money, you're still saving money at the moment. You save 100% of nothing, unless you're North Kesteven, obviously, who are the only employer in your fund who currently offer shared cost AVCs. So, so as I say, you could do it yourself or use AVC Wise if you've not got that knowledge and resource in-house to do it. So if I go through the last few slides, and some of it fits with what Amy spoke about. So on the next slide, what we used to do is go along to employers. We would run one presentation. So this is pre-COVID I'm talking, whereas as a result of COVID, everything is online now, which has made it easier for us to get feedback from employers and members and act upon that feedback. So that one presentation is now grown to 11. I'll give you some examples on the next slide. I'll pick one out in particular, which again fits with what Amy was talking about earlier. So the one top line along to the right, understanding the local government pension scheme. I chair a meeting with the LGA pensions team every couple of months, Lorraine Bennett and her team. Big concern that people come out of the local government pension scheme at the moment because of the cost of living crisis with no real idea of what they're giving up. We've got no chance of getting people to understand the need or the benefits of shared cost AVCs if they don't understand the main scheme to begin with. So you'll see there that understanding the LGPS is just all about explaining 80th, 60th, 49s, normal pension age getting further away, rule of 85 has gone, and trying to get people informed and educated about the main scheme. Then once they've got that bit done, then they've got a chance of understanding AVC. So there's a number of things there that we offer to members. If we move on, and I'll touch on Prue again. I mentioned both Tim and I were made redundant from Prue back in 2018. Prue also had the local government AVC telephony team. They also get made redundant. So AVC Wise have taken a few of that team, which just means then available to your members is one-to-one meetings via Teams. So those members who have got particular questions about their own circumstances, be it annual allowance, lifetime allowance, how much can they have in their AVC to get it all back tax-free, then they can have a one-to-one meeting with someone that will talk them through their own individual circumstances. If we move on, there's also a knowledge hub that's available for members. So there's some useful calculators there. There's some short explainer videos. So a whole host of support. Next slide, there's an employee helpline too. So that's, Tim, you might know, I can't remember how many calls we get on a weekly basis, but average call waiting time is about 50 seconds, I think I picked up last week.
That's a really difficult question you've just asked me, and I don't know,
I know
off the top of my head.
So
thanks for that. I'll find it.
But it just kind of proves the point that members have got questions in AVCs. With what Prue have done with their redundancy programme, they've not got that same support. AVC Wise can give you that support and more, I guess, is the point I'm making. Let me see what else. If we just move to the next slide, I'll take you through these last few ones. I'm just conscious of time for you. An employee platform, so everything's in one place. So an employee who wants to pay a shared cost AVC, do it through the platform. That then allows us to liaise with Prue on the member's behalf and your behalf as the employer too. They can book onto the webinars, individual meetings, access the FAQs, T&Cs. I mentioned the calculators. I mentioned the videos too. From your side as the employer, if we skip on again, there we go. From your side as the employer, what we do is the part that keeps you on the right side of HMRC. So you've got access to the employer, which allows you to manage the shared cost AVCs applications. When it comes to national minimum wage or national living wage, then it's all built into the platform. You can see how much your employer savings are, so you can track that. I've seen some employers will ring fence those savings to use it for a specific purpose. They might keep them savings within finance, or maybe keep them within HR. So what you do with your savings is completely up to you. Importantly, though, you've got that full audit history. That's the part that keeps you on the right side of HMRC. And then if we move to the next slide, which I think is partners feedback, I hope. There we go. Yep, there we are. So just a couple of quotes from some of the employers that we work with already. I had a chat, some of you will know Joe from North Kesteven, Joe Titley. Spoke to Joe a couple of weeks back to see if Joe was able to come along and talk to you about, look, they've used AVC Wise since 2019, but he wasn't available today, but he did give me a couple of things to share with you. Where he said since they've engaged AVC Wise, the uptake of shared cost AVCs has been fairly substantial. It's almost doubled. It's been marketed well. It's a no-brainer. He can track the savings that the councils make. The shift isn't huge, and it's a smooth transition using AVC Wise. So some good positive feedback there from Joe. And then as we head towards the end in the next slide, that's the cost part that I was asked about earlier. So standard charge 4.5% off your saving, but it's going to 5% on the 1st of April. If any of you are interested in how much you can save as an employer, then in the next slide is the information that I need, or with Tim, we can give you a proposal that shows you what your immediate savings would be upon the introduction of shared cost AVCs, but also what we would expect them to grow to over a 3-year period. So all you would need to do is email confirming the number of your local gov members that you have, the number of people that pay AVCs to Prue, and how much you send to Prue each month or over a year. We can then crunch the numbers from there. So if you want that information in my very final slide, you'll see the contact details for me and for Tim. We've also got a third colleague, Joe Carey. It might be any one of us that deals with queries that you've got. But in simple terms, it is a bit of a no-brainer. If you can save money as an employer, and it also helps your employees save money, plus all the support that's available, why wouldn't you? Your question is more, do you use AVC Wise? Or if you've got the capability, just run it in-house, do it yourself, and keep all of your savings, as opposed to giving us a slice. So I will pause there, conscious of time. We've got 4 minutes. Any final questions before I hand back to Joe?
Doesn't seem to be anything. I suppose I can answer your question, Stephen, just in terms of our customer service. You're looking at probably an average of about 35 calls, 35 chats, and about 40 emails per day are answered by our customer services. Over 100 requests a day, I would say. So it's just increasing demand. So I'm sure you'll hear more about shared cost AVCs as time goes on. But Joe, if I pass back to you, and thank you once again for the invite today, and I hope it helps, and live long and prosper, as we say.
Thanks very much, Stephen and Tim. Hopefully everyone's found that really useful. So we've not had a plethora of questions come in. Hopefully you're either stunned silence, or hopefully you're not asleep. But basically what we've covered today, we gave you just a brief update on the fund overall, the position that we're in. I think the importance of clean data hopefully has been hammered home yet again. It was mentioned by myself, by Matt, by Amy. My normal little soapbox I shall jump on ever so quickly. It is you as the employer's responsibility, not your payroll providers. So please make sure you know that they're doing everything they need to. That list of things that Amy's said they need to respond to on the exception report, make sure you as the employer know that your payroll provider is doing that. Amy provided some really useful stuff that you can share with your scheme members to hopefully help them through some of the cost of living situations and help them in their planning for their future retirement. And then Stephen and Tim have given us that really useful information, something for you to take away and consider about the shared cost AVCs. We don't have a huge take-up across Lincolnshire of AVCs. It's a brilliant thing for your scheme members to help them in planning for their retirement. So, you know, do go away and think about that. As I say, get in contact with AVC Wise if you want more information. And then the last thing just to say is, following Jerry's presentation about the pension board, please do have a think if there's anyone that would be interested in taking that employer representative role. I think, as Jerry said, it's enjoyable, it's quite rewarding. So hopefully we'll get some nominations through once I send out the formal request later in April. Thank you, Sally. Apologies if there's been some difficult with interaction for teams. It's the joy of these virtual meetings now, isn't it? We're always happy to hold it in person, but we like to hope we can get a few more people doing it this way. But if there's any other question that come to anyone once we finish this event, please do get in touch with either Claire or myself. We can pass any questions on as needed. So thank you for your time, and I hope you found it useful.